Welcome, colleagues. Just to make people aware, to try and make sure in these testing times, shall we say, that the council is still trying to be open and transparent. This is not being streamed live to the internet, but it will, I believe, go on to a YouTube broadcast. So just as we've been recorded in the past, if we all keep it clean, all will be well. Yeah. I can't see anyone in a waiting room. I've got nothing there at all at the moment. So let us start the agenda and then see how we go along. So first of all, do we have any apologies for absence?
No, Chair.
Okay. In that case, let's move on to item 2. Oh, Councillor Holland.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, Councillor Maxfield sends her apologies, and I am substituting for her this evening.
That's been duly noted, Councillor. Thanks very much. Could I then move on to item 2, which is declarations of interest? Are there any declarations of interest on the items this evening from members? The answer appears to be no. In that case, let's move on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated. I invite comment from members. Are we content with those minutes as a correct record?
Agreed.
Again, I don't see any signs of dissent on the screen, so let's assume that that's correct.
Let's move them.
So we're all happy with that, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so let's move on to item 4 on our agenda, application for development at KIDSGROVE. I'll check with our officers. My understanding is this item has been withdrawn.
Yes, that's correct. The application was withdrawn earlier this week. Right.
In that case, we can progress to item 5 on our agenda, minor development, Clayton Road. Now, first of all, we do have a public speaker on this event who I hope is in the waiting room, and I'm relying on Mr. Elkington at this point to see whether we have that speaker or not.
Just going to invite the speaker into the meeting.
Could I ask if I can be heard?
You can, Bert, yes.
All right, sorry.
Just check who the speaker is that we need for this particular item.
This is Mrs. Wedgwood.
Correct. Mrs. Wedgwood. Okay.
I can confirm, Chairman, that we've already received a written copy of Miss Wedgwood's comments, so hopefully she'll be able to attend in a few seconds and deliver those herself, but we have prepared in case that's not possible.
Okay, thank you very much.
I cannot see Mrs. Wedgwood in the waiting room either by name, and I cannot see her telephone number waiting to speak either.
Somewhere I have the telephone number. I'm slightly worried that if we have public speakers, we shouldn't exclude them because there's a technology failure. Is it possible? Do you have a phone number for her? And if you do, is it possible for you to ring her?
Absolutely. I will give her a call and just see whether she is available.
Okay.
Just wondering, Councillor Fear, if we can't get hold of her, to go on to another item and come back to this, just to give a bit more time.
It's not such a bad idea, Councillor Reddish. Let's just see if because phone call could take a couple of minutes. But if it starts to roll longer than that, I agree with you. It would make sense to move the agenda around so that we're not all just stuck here staring at a screen.
Yeah. I think it's important to them that they're able to speak to us if they can.
To confirm, I've rang Mrs. Wedgwood. There was no answer on a phone, and it went straight through to voicemail.
Okay, could I just ask, Mr. Elkington, was that a landline or a mobile line?
It was a mobile number.
Okay, so that's the only number that I have. So
If it assists,
could I simply ask at this point? Can I ask Mr. Elkington whether the other two speakers are present in the waiting room?
I can confirm, sorry, Chair, that they are.
Right. So what I am minded to do, given that for all we know, Mrs. Wedgwood may simply be encountering IT problems, is to alter the order of the agenda and take item 6 now and then return to item 5 in case our public speaker has managed to gain access by that time. Could I ask at this point our officers whether they have any supplementary comments to make prior to the speakers speaking to us, because obviously they must both be party to any additional comments.
No, we haven't got any supplementary information to report tonight.
Okay, in that case, what I propose to do, colleagues, is we will move to item 6 and then return after we finish with item 6 to item 5 in case our speaker is there. Protocol therefore says that because we have public speakers, the first of those speakers to address us will be an objector to the application. So if I could ask Mr. Elkington to allow that person please to have access and speak, perhaps prior to them actually speaking, if they're brought into the room. I should just go through the protocol itself, which is to say, can the speaker now hear me, Mr. Elkington?
I'm just about to add the speaker in. The speaker is now allowed to talk.
Okay. So, welcome, I think, to Mr. Jowett this evening. I think you are unmuted, sir. I just wish to outline the protocol for addressing the committee, and that is that when you start, you will have 5 minutes to address the committee. It will be timed by Mr. Durham, and after 4 of those 5 minutes are elapsed, Mr. Durham will give you an oral warning that there's only 1 minute left. When those 5 minutes are finished, that is the sum total of your contribution to the meeting. You are welcome to stay and watch the proceedings, but you must not make any further comments at that point. Is that A, can you hear this, and B, is that okay?
Yeah, I could hear you. I don't know whether you can see me or anything.
I can't see you, but at the end of the day, it's the representations you wish to make which are important. So as soon as you wish to begin your 5 minutes, please feel free to do so.
May I just see whether I've got my settings on? I don't seem to. Okay, it's just getting my daughter here, who's just seeing whether I've got my settings on right, so you might be able to see me. Anything on here, Joe?
What have you got to do? What, your camera's not on?
I don't think so. I don't think they have it set up. So.
As a participant in the meeting, as a guest that's invited to speak, your camera won't be switched on in the meeting. It's voice only.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's all right then. Fine, as long as you can, as long as it's working correctly.
Certainly. I think we can all hear you loud and clear.
Fine. May I start?
Yes, please do so.
Okay. We strongly disagree with the Planning Department's recommendation to permit this development because the dwelling is too large for the plot and invasive of privacy, and it has a negative impact on trees and the environment. I strongly urge you to make a site visit so that you can see the situation for yourselves. I hope to show that the Planning Department has made the decision to permit based on misleading data. Overbearing size and situation. Using data from Knights, the inspector states that the proposed dwelling would be commensurate with the scale of the other examples of dwellings within the wider area. Knights calculated the plot ratio without the inclusion of the integral carport and sun terrace to give an unrepresentative 17% value. The true value is 28%, and using Knight's figures, which conveniently omit several dwellings with very large gardens locally, e.g. the Crown lands directly opposite the proposed site, the average for the Heath is at only 11.8%. The proposed dwelling is clearly not commensurate with the other dwellings on Ashley Heath. Further, if the plot is so large, why the need to locate the building so close to our boundary? The answer is obvious. The building is indeed too large for the plot. Actual and visual donation. The building will be made taller by the use of a ring beam construction. Mrs. Moulton suggests by 110 millimeters, but close examination of the carport foundation slab drawing clearly shows that the height increase will be far greater. Indeed, even Knight seemed to be in some doubt as to the height of the building, having given incorrect details in the appellant's statement of case and having issued a footnote retraction in the appellant's final comment. Building impact. The building inspector states that there is low levels of definition between adjacent plots. The proposed dwelling is only to be a metre from our boundary, and indeed Mr. Perkins has already started to remove hedges and erect a wooden fence between our properties. How can there possibly be low levels of definition in these circumstances? The inspector also states that the building's roof slope pitches away from our garden. In fact, we're faced with a gable end. The proposed balcony, only a metre away from our rear garden, approaching 7 metres high, overlooking our principal lounge windows. The key southeast elevation drawing, the elevation showing the overlooking boundary bounding our property, is strangely missing. However, the plans do show a door to a balcony. The recommendation by the planning department is that there should be no balcony and obscure glass. I ask the question, why would the plans therefore include a door to a non-existent balcony? For these reasons, I feel that the application does not meet policy CSP1 of the core spatial strategy and policies at LNP1 and LNP2 of the Loggerheads neighbourhood plan. Trees. We have serious concerns for the inconvenient trees. Planner's recommendation for approval came before landscape officer Mr. Peter Stepien was satisfied the development would not impact on significant trees. In his email of the 19th March to Mrs. Moulton, he talks of continued concerns regarding root protection, ground levels, irrigation viability, post-development resentment to close proximity trees, and the impossibility of the post-development mitigation strategies. All these concerns remain unanswered. Indeed, in an email dated 9th of April, Mr. Stepien was unaware that the council had recommended approval before his concerns had been addressed. Tree 5, T5, is particularly inconvenient to the build, and initially its felling was requested. The arboreal report commissioned by Mr. Perkins classifies T5 as poor and in the age range 10 to 20 years. We've lived in the house for 25 years and have pictures of it when we moved in, looking much as it does then as it does now. Also, it looks strikingly similar to a tree in our garden 2 metres away from it, which is classified as good. Is this underestimation of T5's age an attempt to suggest that it's not protected, and its designation as poor quality an attempt to allow its felling?
1 minute.
Convenient tree, T33, which is also listed for removal along with others. This tree sits in our garden, close to the boundary, and is directly in line with the proposed non-existent balcony and glass wall. It is easy to see why Mr. Perkins would like its removal. After informing the planners that the tree was not situated on Mr. Perkins' land, this request was redacted, Knight's explaining that it was a mistake. But we are still very worried that it will be impacted by the build, as the ring beam travels through its RPA and no accommodation has been made for its protection. With this application, concerns have not been addressed, data is incorrect, and the site is being worked on. I suggest that development be rejected, or at least a site visit be carried out. A solution: simply place the building at the centre of the plot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jowett. So we now have, I believe, a speaker in favour of the application, Mr. Cokestake, who is with us, but he's muted at the moment. And now he's ready to go. So can you hear me, Mr. Cokestake?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. In that case, you know the drill. You have 5 minutes. There'll be a warning given when 4 of those are elapsed. So please start when you feel ready to do so.
Thank you, Chair. And my sincere thanks go out to the Borough Council for being proactive and hosting virtual committees. Firstly, it is important for me to say that the applicant, his family and his architect are all local people residing in the village and have all lived on Ashley Heath themselves for a considerable period of time. Consequently, they have first-hand experience of this unique environment, and it is this that has led the applicant to pursue the construction of a new family home here, including the substantially more expensive substructure design which is necessary to safeguard the existing trees, and I will come on to this. Planning permission was refused in 2019 for 2 reasons. Because your officers considered that the dwelling was disproportionate to the size of the plot, and because 4 trees were to be removed. A subsequent appeal was dismissed, but only on the basis that the trees would be removed to make way for the house. Although dismissing the appeal, the inspector did make very clear the following: that the scale of the development was acceptable, that the relationship with neighbouring dwellings and their gardens was acceptable, and that the impact upon those trees to be retained was acceptable. This appeal decision is now of material, considerable weight. It was clear that the inspector had left the door open for a modified proposal which addressed the tree objection. On the basis of the inspector's conclusions, a dwelling of the same footprint, design and siting has been resubmitted. This made sense because the inspector was satisfied with those issues and they cannot now be revisited. They have been put to bed. This leaves one issue that the application had to address: the retention of the 4 trees. It is now proposed to retain all the trees on the site, including the 4 that were proposed to be removed previously. The officer sets out clearly in her report to you how this would be achieved, through adopting a pile and ring beam construction technique. This would create airspace below the house, and this is a tried, tested and robust process to retain the trees and their root system in a healthy condition for the long term, and it can be secured by planning condition. The officer report also addresses the so-called issue of tree resentment. I'd like to add some common sense to this topic. If one resented trees, one would not live on Ashley Heath. As I said at the introduction of my presentation, the applicant and his family have previously lived on Ashley Heath, and the prevalence of trees is one of the reasons that they purchased this site. In any event, the council ultimately retained control because all of the trees are protected. In conclusion, it is the unique nature of Ashley Heath and the disposition of its properties which presents an ideal opportunity to produce a new dwelling of a passive, energy efficient and bespoke design. It employs high quality materials which respond to context. Such an approach would not be possible in a more open and regular settlement, and this dwelling would make a very positive contribution to the mix of individual styles that are dotted about the heath. This is a policy compliant scheme, exceptionally well designed, and if permission is granted, the Perkins family would like to get on, build this home straight away and continue their commitment to the heath. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Copestake. Right, colleagues, you've heard our 2 speakers. I'll now ask our officer if she has any comments to make on that, and perhaps because it's awkward in this environment not to see bits and pieces, take us through perhaps the plan and such like of the development, proposed development.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share with you, hopefully, a presentation with some of the key information on the application. Can you see a title screen saying application for minor development? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Right. So the plan I'm showing you now is the application site. So it's the site edged in red. You can see the relationship of the site to the adjoining properties. Mr. Jarrett, who spoke in opposition to the application, is occupant of the Shearling, so that is a property very close to the application site. So this is an aerial photograph of the site. So the site is, if you can see the cursor, hopefully, it is in that area there. And this is a plan showing the position of the property within the site. So this is a cruciform shaped property, as you'll see in that position there. And the property that you can just see the end of is the shieling. So that's the property that's adjoining, and the one that Mr. Jarrett refers to in his representation. So this is a plan showing the trees to be retained, and those are everything on the plan shown in blue. And here's to remind members, this is the design of the dwelling. And I've also got a few photographs of the site. So this is the garage within the site that will be removed, and this is the garden area within which the new dwelling will be sited. So that's the existing property that will be retained. So the new dwelling sits in the area to the rear of that property, and that's the rear elevation. Looking along the side of the property towards BIRKS Drive, that shows the shieling in the adjoining plot. And this is a view of the plot from the rear garden of the shieling. So that's the garage that you saw in the first photograph. And a slightly out of focus photograph showing the rear of the property known as the shieling and the adjoining plot where the dwelling is proposed. Okay, so I'll just remove that from the screen. I can go back to that if needs be. Just want to reiterate some of the points that was made by Mr. Copestake in support of the application. This is a resubmission of a proposal following an appeal decision. The refusal reasons related to the scale and disproportionate size of the dwelling and the harm that the council considered would arise to the character of Ashley Heath and the loss of trees. And has been pointed out by Mr. Copestake, the council was unsuccessful in convincing the inspector that the dwelling would be harmful to the area by virtue of its scale and its disproportionate size in relation to the plot. I just want to quote you something from the inspector's decision letter. So the inspector did make reference to the ratio of development to plot size and acknowledged that although the ratio of development to plot size would be at the higher end of examples found locally within the woodland, it would be difficult to clearly ascertain the juxtaposition of the proposed building within the plot boundaries due to the setback position of the plot. As a result, any effect of the siting and scale and the development on the character of the locality would be very limited. And there is no reason to believe that the inspector would have reached a different conclusion had the information been different in terms of the plot sizes. So I would say that there's no basis upon which to revisit the issue of impact on the area in terms of its character due to the scale and disproportionate size. The council didn't advance a reason for refusal relating to harm to residential amenity. That was assessed within the inspector's report, nevertheless, and the inspector concluded that it was an acceptable relationship, and there's no fundamental changes in the latest submission which would suggest that a different conclusion should be reached. So it's all down to the impact of the proposal on the trees and whether the applicant on this particular proposal addresses the concerns that the inspector had. The trees that were shown to be removed before are to be retained. The landscape development section have not raised any objections in their latest comments in relation to loss of trees arising from the construction of the dwelling. They have concerns about post-development resentment, so they are concerned that at a later date when the dwelling is occupied that there'll be pressure to remove trees, but as set out in the report, that didn't constitute a reason for refusal, and the inspector didn't raise that as a concern in dismissing the appeal and identify loss of trees as being the reason for that. So the officer recommendation is one of approval because in consideration of that appeal decision, it appears to officers that the reasons that the inspector dismissed the appeal have been appropriately addressed, and this is an acceptable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. Could I revisit one point which struck me from what's been said, and that was questions about accuracy of measurements, and indeed one in particular about measurements of height. Are we sure that we've got our figures right?
The information that has been provided on height is provided by the architect. We've got no basis upon which to conclude that information is incorrect. There is an alteration in the scheme, this proposal to that previously proposed, because of the introduction of the ring and beam foundation to address the impact on the trees. But yes, I've got no basis to conclude that that's unacceptable. There is a measurement has been done on the plans, and the information has been accepted from the architect that the difference is 110 millimeters, which is relatively inconsequential in terms of impact on the overall scale and dominance of the proposed property on the adjoining occupants.
Okay, the second point, if I may, again, just picking up on things I've heard, reference was made to provisions or seeming provisions for a balcony. I am correct in thinking, aren't I, that the fifth of our conditions says that there is no balcony to be formed on that side, on bedroom 1?
Yes, the plans don't show a balcony. There's a small area outside of the windows, and one is effectively a door that you could step out, but it's not of a size that would be used as a balcony. And with those conditions, it couldn't at a later date be a balcony created, so there'd be no ability to put up a balustrade and allow a small amount of space external to that bedroom where someone could sit and potentially overlook the adjoining property. So the combination of that condition and the requirement that the windows are on that side facing elevation and that are in very close proximity to the boundary of the adjoining property of obscure glaze are sufficient to address any concerns about unacceptable impact on residential amenity.
Okay, I'm just slightly, what you seem to be implying, if I'm writing what I'm hearing, is that there still might be some sort of, I think they're called Juliet balconies, that sort of thing. I'm just wondering why that's not thought intrusive as well.
Yes, it's possible that that you could, although the condition would prevent the formation of the barrier that would the protective barrier that makes opening the door safe. The window could still be opened, and there could still be some overlooking of the adjoining garden of the shieling, and some potentially some interrelationship between that window and rear windows of the shieling. It's possible that you could require, through condition, that that's a non-opening, or certainly it's not a door. It can be amended to a window, so it makes the ability to overlook the adjoining property less intrusive. It's a fairly standard condition to have obscure glazing and have only the top part of the window that's enabled to be open, so that you can't look out onto an adjoining property. So if members were concerned, felt that there was still a risk to overlooking and loss of privacy, an additional condition could be imposed, or the condition could be amended to prevent a door in that elevation.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Moulton. I've no further questions at the moment. I'll just now ask if members have anything to comment on. Again, if you could use the sort of raised hands thing, and then I will try and pick up people one by one as we go along. Councillor Reddish.
Thank you. I would be minded to take up Mrs. Moulton's suggestion of putting a condition that goes from a door to a window. I don't know what my colleagues think, but I think that is advisable. The principle has been established here, really, with planning permission. And it seems to me that the tree scenario has also been addressed. So, from my point of view, if we could just amend the door to a window, I would be minded to permit this application. My understanding is that the construction hours are 9 to 6, Monday to Friday, and 9 to 1 at the weekend. Can somebody just clarify that for me, please?
Just bear with me. I need to look in the back office system what the environmental health recommendations are. Bear with me a moment.
In the meantime, I know Councillor Proctor wishes to make a contribution again. Could I just ask, Councillor, if in future, if you could use a little hands up thing, because it makes it a lot easier for me, because I can then keep my eye on one part of the screen rather than having to pan around lots of little screens. But after Mrs. Moulton's spoken, I'll invite you to speak.
Unfortunately, I've just lost network connection, so I'll need to reconnect. So I will be able to give you an answer shortly, but I can't give you an answer just yet, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's okay.
Perhaps we should let Councillor Proctor make his point, and Mrs. Moulton can beaver away at connecting while that's going on. Councillor.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. My hand was raised because I wish to second what it was that Councillor Reddish was saying in terms of the amendment, and to support that fully, that I would therefore support the recommendation with that amendment as outlined by Councillor Reddish. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. How are you?
Just letting me reconnect, so just bear with me. Sorry about this.
Great, Councillor. Elaine, I've actually got connection myself, so I can confirm those working hours if it assists.
I think it was. Thank you very much. That's very useful.
Come in here to see as you're correct. 8 o'clock in the morning through to 6 o'clock in the evening, Monday to Friday, and then 8 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon on a Saturday.
Okay.
No working on a Sunday or a public holiday.
Okay, I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Are there any further comment from members? In that case, it's been proposed and accepted and seconded that we vote for this application, but with the amendment that the provision for a door on the relevant side is changed to that of a window. So I'm going to take a vote on that in the first place, and then if that fails, we will look to a vote on the original recommendation. Okay. Right, Mr. Dickinson, Mr. Speak. You're still muted. No, you're okay. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm whether we are going for glazed fenestration with opening just at the top as well. Remember that was discussed, but I'm not clear whether members wish to make that a requirement or not. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I think that was my intention. Yes.
Okay. So thanks for the comment. So are we all clear what we're voting for?
Yep.
In that case, I'm going to take the vote as I see it on my participants thing. So, Councillor Proctor, are you for or against the recommendation?
For.
Councillor Williams, are you for or against the recommendation?
For.
Councillor Reddish, are you for or against the recommendation?
4.
Councillor Holland, are you for or against the recommendation?
4.
Councillor Moffat, are you for or against the recommendation?
4.
Therefore, that recommendation is passed. We can now hopefully revert to our order and take item 5. I'll just ask Mr. Elkington if he's tried to make contact in the meanwhile with our speaker.
Yes, the speaker is ready to enter the meeting when you're ready for the item.
Excellent. In that case, again, I think I'll ask our officer first of all whether she's got any additional information to convey to the meeting, because obviously our speaker needs to be privy to that.
No additional information.
Right. In that case, if we could have our speaker come into the meeting. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'd just like, before we move to a debate, to ask our office to respond to any of the points that she's heard.
Yes, if I could. It may help if I just show some information to give the members an idea how they intend to operate this business. So I'm just going to share a presentation. Just bear with me a second. So hopefully you can see the title sheet of the presentation. So for members' benefit, this is the site. This is BP Swiss service station, and the residents.
Mrs. Moulton, I don't know about colleagues. All I can see is a list of items, beginning photographs, and then a series of Adobe documents underneath.
Oh, okay. Let me stop and start again. Let's see if I can get it to. Are you still seeing the same thing on the?
I can now see a plan.
Oh, right, great. So this is the site plan. This is the BP Swiss service station, and as you can see, there's many properties in the adjoining residential area that back onto the site and onto Clayton Road. An aerial photo to give you an idea of the relationship of the site to the surrounding properties. So this is the existing site plan. So at the moment, there is permission for a car wash to take place. It's not been operating recently, but there is permission, and there is a car wash shelter at the northern end of the site, and there are 2 self-serve car wash bays within a building towards the southern end of the site. So this is what the buildings look like at the moment. So this is a proposal. So and I'll describe how they're going to operate by referring to this plan. So the vehicles come in at the northern end of the site, and they go into the car wash shelter where the hand car washing is carried out within that building. They will then exit from the rear of the building and run down this internal rear access road and come back out onto the forecourt at the southern end, where they will go under the canopy, and the vehicles will be dried, and potentially there'll be some internal cleaning of the car carried out, which might involve vacuuming. So the vacuum is stored within the cabin, and the hose is brought out to the vehicle, and vacuuming takes place within the vehicle under the canopy. So all the washing, all the machinery is operated within the building. The vacuum will be in within the storage cabin, but obviously there will be some noise within the forecourt because the vehicle will be under the canopy, and that is the canopy, if you can see it at the right hand side of the front elevation. So this is an existing building. This is where the vehicles will come in, and you can see a vehicle heading in the direction that they would come in if the car wash was operating. So that's where they come out at the back of the building. So you see the end of the internal access road.
Now, could I just pause for that moment, Ms. Moulton, because I know this site, it's my ward, but other members don't. Just to point out that the view that we see now on the right-hand side where that hedgerow is, directly behind that hedgerow are the houses of the people that we're talking about. Yeah?
Yes, so that there is a property there at the end. You can see the roof of the property, that's a house. And yes, there are houses that back on to this rear boundary of the site, which is the boundary that you can see towards the left-hand side of the photo there. And there you'll see the properties and the proximity of the properties to the site. So that's looking back towards the back of the building where they would come out. And that's where they re-enter the forecourt. That's the proposed, or the existing, it's already on site, but it's part of the application to retain that storage building, and that's where the existing jet wash facilities, so self-serve facilities are. So that's the proposal, that's the site. There has been a lot of consideration given to the impact of this development or this proposal on residential amenity. I'll stop sharing that. So we'll and there's been noise assessments submitted, that which have been challenged by our environmental health colleagues. Eventually they have been satisfied that the noise assessment has been done in a robust and appropriate fashion, and the conclusions are that this development or this use can be made acceptable subject to certain restrictions, which are referred to within the recommendation of the report. So so the matters that I shall just get environmental health comments. Just bear with me. I put the right reference number, I'll put the environmental health comments in. They've made a number of recommendations, some of which will require further information to be submitted, and the requirement will be that that information is submitted and agreed prior to the use commencing. So the recommendations of environmental health are that there should be no activities associated with the washing or drying of cars and vehicles to take place on that internal access road which runs directly to the rear of the residential properties that back onto it. All the drying equipment is installed. Well, no drying equipment is installed on site because the drying is taking place by hand, is not by a machine, and that no activities associated with the washing or vacuuming of cars or vehicles shall take place before 10 AM on Sundays or bank holidays or public holidays. No compressor, plant or equipment used in association with the washing or cleaning of car vehicles shall be located externally, and prior to the use of the site commencing, a noise management plan shall be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority, and that's to agree certain management controls that will minimise noise relating to the slamming of car doors, the playing of music in a car with windows and doors open, those sort of behavioural activities that can add to the impact of a use and create unacceptable relationship with residential property. So the aim is to provide more controls and to aim to limit the noise arising from this proposed use. More controls than exist on the existing lawful permitted use of the car wash. So that use could recommence from a planning perspective at any time in the future. There'd be no controls, and there are limited restrictions on that, on the operation of that car wash. The recommendation in respect of this particular proposal is to apply more control to address the concerns of residents. Ultimately, if the use operates and there are the controls that are place through the planning system don't satisfactorily address noise, then environmental health can take action. But the recommendation of environmental health is that subject to these restrictions and controls, that the use is acceptable and planning permission can be granted.
Thanks very much, Mrs. Moulton. Could I ask a question about that lane, whatever we want, Ginnell or whatever we want to call it, round the back, very close to those residents' houses? Environmental health, rightly in my opinion, say that no activity pertaining to the washing, etc., should go on there. Now then, what I want to know is whether that would include, as I think it should, the queuing of cars going out of the car wash round the back for the drying on the other side. Because I can see a world where a large volume of cars come in, they're waiting for these bays to queue, and people then go out of the car wash and they use the back road as a queuing area from the washing to the drying. And that, of course, will bring engine noise, engine pollution and such like very close to these houses. And that seems to be against the spirit of what environmental health is saying. I just want to make sure that it's also against the letter of what environmental health is saying.
Well, I think that goes slightly further than the recommendation of environmental health. They're saying that there should be no washing and drying of cars on that road. They're not saying that there should be no waiting of cars on that internal access road before they get to the drying area. So that is certainly a control beyond what they're recommending. It's possible that obviously you're having your car washed in the car wash bay, and then you'll be driving around to be dried, and it's possible that in itself, the time it takes to wash is a similar time to it takes to dry the car, and therefore you'll only have one car in each area and no queuing. I can't see, if members felt it was necessary, why there would be any planning reason why we couldn't impose greater controls to say there should be no waiting of vehicles on that internal access road. But certainly environmental health are not advising that in itself will cause any adverse impact on residential amenity if an appropriate noise management plan is agreed and implemented. So it's not a recommendation that your officers are making, but that it could devise a condition that meets the tests of conditions if members wish that to be imposed.
Again, given that I'm the ward member and that residents have made representation to me that queuing on that lane when it's been operated the other way round has caused quite a lot of loss of amenity, I would like to add that as a condition, because I think that's one of the main problems that this has caused in the past, is that a queue of traffic on that lane, as I think Hope members can see, very, very close to the boundary of really quite small gardens. So, you know, there's no way that you could go out and enjoy your garden and not have this imposed upon you were there to be a queue there today. So I personally would wish to propose adding that as an extra condition on the ones that are there.
Okay. Yeah.
Councillor Moffat, sorry. You're muted, Councillor Moffat. Can you unmute yourself, please?
I am unmuted now.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'd like to second that proposal. I was going to ask whether it was possible to put a limit on the number of vehicles that would be either in the forecourt or waiting. So you've covered that very eloquently, and I'd like to second your proposal.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Reddish.
Yeah, I would have seconded that proposal. I've just got one question mark, because the Clayton Road is a very busy road, and I don't want the effect of not allowing cars to wait at the back means that you have a queue on the forefront and possibly onto the Clayton Road. So I just want to seek clarification that we can have some sort of zigzag system on the forecourt to prevent traffic being on the Clayton Road. Because the worst scenario would be to stop the cars at the back would actually cause a problem with on the main road. So can we just clarify that for me, please?
When you say zigzag on the forecourt, you mean within the application site, within the site of the BP Swift service station? Certainly that would be, but would be within, would be something that could be required by a condition of a planning permission. That however wouldn't prevent vehicles waiting on the highway. It wouldn't control activity on the highway, so vehicles to avoid parking in the zigzags may choose to wait on the highway if they considered it was safe to do so. That obviously drivers will make a judgment as to when it's safe and when it isn't to wait on the highway. But yes, it wouldn't prevent that from happening. So that is a potential outcome.
It might help it not happening though if there was some space on the forecourt.
I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that again, members who know this area, the forecourt here is quite deep. So it's not the case there is no space for a sort of management programme to be put into some sort of perspective, yeah? It's a fairly deep forecourt, so there is room for, I would say, at least 3 or 4 cars to queue at the front, off the highway. So maybe we could say that, you know, a sort of queue management or whatever clever phrase we can use for that scheme should also be part of what's going on. And perhaps we should say welcome to Councillor Northcott at this point.
Thank you very much and good evening, Chair. Just about, I've lost my internet access at home, so I'm trying to use the mobile phone data. I don't know how good that will be or how clear that is. But,
at the moment, it's absolutely fine, Councillor.
Thank you very much. And are you all well?
Yeah.
You are indeed.
In respect to this, sorry, in respect to the suggestion, I mean, it could be something that's integrated into the noise management plan that we're seeking to secure through a condition. Oh, that's the recommendation of your officer, is to secure the noise management plan. That could specify that part of that plan sets out areas within the site where vehicles can wait before they go into the car wash facility, to avoid queuing on that internal rear access road and to avoid vehicles queuing on Clayton Road, potentially causing a highway safety impact, which obviously we wouldn't want to allow to happen as a result of the use that's being proposed. So that could be incorporated. It's not something as officers were recommending, but it could be part of that or specific requirement of the noise management plan that it includes.
Again, I think that sounds very sensible, Mrs. Morgan. The only slight concern I would have with integrating it that way, although I'm sure a form of words could be found, is to make sure that the plan is about the management of vehicles as well as the management of noise, because I can see a world where you simply put a little square down the forecourt saying this is the noise management thing you can put there, and you know, don't use the apron of tarmac which is there for a purpose that could be used for the avoidance of queuing on the road and such like. So if we can integrate it in the noise management scheme and call it noise and parking management or something like that, I think that's fine. Otherwise, I think it should sit there as a separate thing. Again, this is about the spirit as well as the letter, if you see what I mean.
Well, obviously we haven't worded the condition in full. If members are happy to leave it with officers when they're wording the condition, if it works better as separate conditions, or whether it could be worded appropriately so it's clear and ambiguous as a single condition, we do it that way. But either way, we can secure through conditions that parking management plan and require its implementation when the use is operating.
Okay. Any further comment from members? I don't see any hands up. Councillor Williams, but you're muted, Councillor. Can you unmute yourself?
How's that, Mr. Chair?
That's fine. That's fine.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about the back exits, because these companies, they take on valeting contracts, where valeting is takes a lot longer than just drying the car off. So there could be a backup of vehicles on the forecourt that then ultimately would back up around the back, and it'd be easy to park vehicles around there ready for the valeting. On saying that, so I agree with the points on that, but there was an acoustic fence at the back. Who is responsible for that fence? Is the owners of the properties, the residential properties, or is it in the ownership of the business? So the lady did mention about a acoustic fence around there, and I suspect that's what she's talking about. What is the officer's comment on that acoustic fence? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
There is, I have no information as to who owns the fence that's there. Certainly the Environmental Health Division aren't recommending the installation of or the retention of an acoustic fence. Their controls over the use relate to restrictions on activities and hours, and the requirement to agree a noise management plan. They don't specify that an acoustic fence is provided and maintained along that rear boundary. I'm not clear where the reference to an acoustic fence has come from. I mean, there clearly is a fence there, but there's no recommendation from Environmental Health that is an acoustic fence, so thereby has properties over and above a standard boundary garden fence.
Could I come back, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly, Councillor.
I suspect the resident mentioned the cutting down of trees and bushes. I suspect there was some edging along that top of the wall that again keeps noise from going into the back gardens. So I expect some action or some activity has gone on there, and I'd like to recommend it, or that the Environmental Health, sorry, the noise people have a look at that back way. I suspect bushes and that have been cut down. I don't know, I'm only surmising that, but the resident did mention about bushes. She did mention the acoustic fence, and I suspect that fence is owned by the residents. It's up to them to maintain it, but again, I think it's up to this business really. And Environmental Health can look at that, and I'd leave it to them to make a decision. Because I mean, acoustic fence, I mean, I would put it on the business to put an acoustic fence up, but then you've got no man's land, and you go into a lot of problems with that, as you do on when housing estates are built next to older properties. So I think that should be looked at by the Environmental Health on the noise problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's fair to say, I mean, I have visited this site, and it does seem to me that, yes, there must have been a line of shrubs of some sort there which have been cut down. You can see little trunks and things at the base of that sleeper wall. I suppose for us here, the question is now whether we feel, and again, this is not something which has been recommended by our officers, but we may feel it's a good idea, that restitution of some sort of planting be made along that wall, which would be some sort of acoustic barrier. I don't think, again, and I think I'm right in saying Environmental Health have not, in their noise assessment, have not said that an acoustic fence should be erected here. So the question is whether we feel content with the provisions that say there should be no queuing on that back ginnel or whatever, or we feel that additionally to that, some planting should be made along the boundary, I guess. And I looked at our office to see whether that would be a valid condition that could be placed on there if people are so minded.
Not conifers.
Would it be helpful if I brought the photographs back up?
Yes, please do, Mrs. Moulton, please do.
Can you see the photo that I'm sure? Right, so this is the rear boundary. Can everybody see that? So yeah. There is a grassed area, so there is some opportunity to put some planting in there. It's of a reasonable width, so there would be some ability to landscape that. It's unclear whether there was anything in there. It's possible that there was something along that boundary.
It doesn't look like it. Where it looks slightly more overgrown towards the top, or sort of the top left of the picture, so to speak. There, I think. I thought some shrubbery had been taken out.
Right. Well, it looks quite densely landscaped there, but there may have been more planting in than there currently is when this photograph was taken, which I think was earlier this year. So there is the opportunity to plant. I think environmental health would advise you that planting does little, if anything, to mitigate the impact of noise, but it does assist in the perception of this a suitable separation from a noise generating use and residential amenity. So there may be some benefits in securing some planting along there from a perception point of view, and a condition could be imposed requiring the implementation of a landscaping scheme that needs to be agreed prior to work commencing, or the use commencing, agreed and implemented prior to the use commencing. If members wished to explore the requirement to have an acoustic fence, I think we would wish to discuss that with environmental health before we could recommend as officers that such a condition would be reasonable and appropriate to impose. So I would suggest that if you wanted to go along that route, a decision should be deferred till that has been explored and information can be reported at a later date. But if it's about landscaping, I can advise you that then yes, we could require landscaping to be implemented in that area.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. Could you there we go. So I look to Councillor Williams, who's raised these points. I mean, whether he feels that there's enough here for deferral, and we should only defer if we feel we really have to, or whether he wishes to make a proposal that some planting. And I think again we've heard not conifers, and I'm quite in agreement with you, Councillor. But I think we could leave the details of that in the hands of our officers, but we could actually put the condition in as a condition that we wanted that this evening. So I just looked as to whether you're interested in either of those two things.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll leave it to the officers to look at that, and it's no good insisting on we do something, and that causes more problems in the future. So I'll leave it to the officers, but it just seems that it's all we've got the concrete walls, and the noise bounces off. I just saw some soft acoustic type of material along there would help. But I'd leave it to the officers in the meantime, Mr. Chairman.
Would that be true of planting as well as the fence, councillors? We can put the planting in as a condition now. It's only the fence that needs to come back.
Yeah, if you go under the fence, I think you're opening a can of worms on that. I don't know whether I'll leave it to the officers. We can impose we could say a condition, put a acoustic fence up, but again, would that be, how can I say, finish the job, and then we'd end up with enforcement officers and all the rest of it. So I don't want to go down that route. I want something that's practical, that'll work, and help the residents to live alongside this particular business. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Please.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the photographs, I don't know if you can recall them, or I can pull them back up if it assists. But on both of those points, the landscaping and the acoustic fence, there are two sort of sides to that. Looking at the photographs, it does appear that the actual, I will just quickly sort of show this for convenience. The fence is piecemeal in form, so we've got separate bits across there. If you can see my screen, can you? Yeah. I believe this is private ownership as the fence moves across. So providing an acoustic fence would be a costly exercise. although it's a close-boarded timber fence, they're an engineered structure and they take some effort to build.
Correct.
The applicants may sort of rail against that one and come back. So that's, given that the environmental health team have not requested that we have a fence, it would be difficult to sort of insist on that one. The other side about landscaping, I can see some merit in that, but I can also see that if a series of trees, cherries or something else were planted in this location along this grass verge, not only would you have the stem of the tree rising up alongside the fence, but the actual branches themselves would start to lead over the boundary, and the canopy of the trees would then be at this sort of level above the trees. We can specify the tree stock, we can try and identify specimens that will rise, but it will have a twin function, particularly in the autumn, of casting leaves into the neighbours' properties, but also blocking light coming over the properties as well. So it could have the twin problems. These are south-facing gardens in this location, so the arc of the sun rises in that distance, comes over the building and rises back in this position, which, if it helps, sort of rises over here. So they rise and come over. So the
west facing
that way. So it would block out the sun into those properties. I think without any input from the neighbours on this one, it would be difficult to say that that would be acceptable to them at this stage. I hope that sort of assists. Thank you.
It may be useful to know that we have Darren Walters from Environmental Health in the waiting room. He could join the meeting if members felt that his expertise would assist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be very useful. In the meantime, perhaps I know Councillor Moffat wishes to make a comment.
Could it just come back just before we go? I've got a Google Earth I'm looking at. I'm looking at the application site, and there's a car parked on the grass, piece of grass that we're talking about. So that is in the past. Cars have been parking on that piece of grass. I will leave that one as well. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat?
I was just going to add the comment that doing some planting would actually help reduce some of the carbon emissions. So that was all I was going to say in favour, actually, of putting some planting in that area at the back there.
Thank you, Councillor. Perhaps if we could ask Mr. Walters to comment on planting and such like at this juncture. He needs to unmute himself, unless I can do it for him. It'll be okay to go.
Yeah, apologies for the photograph if that came up. That was something at the Natural History Museum a while ago. Right, okay, so yes, the applicant's undertaken a comprehensive noise assessment. It's been undertaken by people who have helped to devise the British standard for industrial noise assessment, so they do know what they're on about. We've asked them to address a number of issues in the assessments for the application, taking into account the previous history of the site and the complaints that caused by the previous operation. And we've moved forward on the recommendation of a robust and updated assessment. So we've not taken the first assessment, we've asked them to go away and refine it and consider more things. So that's why we've come to the recommendation that we have, that we've come to committee. In terms of the acoustic, well, the conversation we're having about the greenery and the shrubbery along the boundary there, that in reality wouldn't offer any practical benefits in terms of noise attenuation. It's more of a visual screen, more of a psychological benefit, if anything. So there's really nothing to be gained there in terms of the planting for acoustic purposes. The assessment that's been undertaken shows that the activity wouldn't cause a noise nuisance or interference with the use and enjoyment of the property. And in actual fact, the application that's before you is a substantial improvement on what could already take place on that site in terms of a lot of the noise generating activities being housed within buildings or within containers under this application. So that's a big plus on this application. I've taken the opportunity to ask for a noise management plan, just mindful of how operations can evolve over time with new equipment, new operators, and how busy sites can get. So that does offer us some degree to adapt controls over time should activities change, operation increase. And ultimately we've got a fallback position of statutory nuisance should we need to go down that route. But I'm hoping that with the assessment that's been undertaken and with the conditions that we've proposed, that will resolve a lot of the issues and fears for the residents in that neighbourhood.
Thank you very much. Could I just ask if you would comment on the notion of planting? Mr. Fleet raised this problem that many species of trees would perhaps overshadow these gardens, cause nuisance with leaves and such like. Is that an important consideration in your opinion?
It isn't something I would pass comment on in terms of acoustics. I think it's more of a visual issue. Obviously, if you are looking at the Leylandii or equivalent, then you've got to be mindful of how high those can get, and then you've got problems potentially with high hedges and enforcement of that. But potentially you could possibly put a condition, I suppose, on the ultimate height of that hedge and what it contains. But again, that isn't an acoustic, wouldn't be serving any useful acoustic purpose in my view.
Again, since we've got a landscape officer with us, perhaps I don't know if she would wish to make a comment on trees in this place, whether they're a good thing, a bad thing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
There we go.
It'd be a mixed thing with trees in this area. There would need to be the right species that don't become too big or too overbearing for the situation. It is quite a confined space at the back there. And again, yeah, it would really just be a visual thing. The depth of the amount of space that they have wouldn't really sort of do anything sort of significant in terms of noise, as you know, as Darren has already said. But it may be possible to find suitable species that could be used in that there, but it would be limited because of the amount of space that's available.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more comments from members? Councillor Proctor? Can you unmute yourself, Councillor? We're not winning.
Are you there? Hello?
Yep, we're in, yes.
Right. I'm beginning to think that we're creating more problems than we're solving with this. And I think we may be reaching the stage of doing something that's unnecessary. So I'm not really comfortable with trying to force any trees into this area that are likely to cause more problems than they solve. So I'm sorry, I'm leaning the other way now.
Any further comment from members? We'll see if we can arrive at a vote of some shape or form.
Could I just say, Mr. Chairman, where I think we've discussed it, and it was voted up because of the noise and acoustic properties, and I've been told by the experts that it won't happen. But I can just have said, I can see there the Google Earth where a car is parked on that side of the back exit on the grass area. So a condition there, no cars to be parked on the grass and on the hard surface of that back lane.
Yeah, that makes eminent sense, Councillor. I think at the moment what we have is the recommendation encapsulating the conditions from our environmental health department, and also one saying no queuing on that back lane, and I think we can add to that no parking on the verge on that back lane as well. And then also a noise and parking management scheme for the access to the actual car wash building at the front. That's what I'm hearing anyway. Are there any further comments from members? If not, we will go for a vote, I think, on those conditions that I've just stated. Are members happy with that?
Yes.
In that case, again, what I'll do, if I'd ask you, colleagues, to unmute yourself, because I will do this member by member. And again, I'll just take it from the participant list that I've got on my screen. So, Councillor Williams, are you for or against the recommendation with those additions?
For.
Councillor Northcott?
For.
Councillor Reddish?
For.
Councillor Moffat?
For.
Councillor Proctor? Councillor Proctor is gone. Councillor Holland, are you still with us?
He's muted.
I am still here, yes.
Are you for or against this recommendation, Councillor?
With the adjustments that you've explained, yes, I'm for.
Therefore, that passes regardless of Councillor Proctor's there's a clear majority. I think it would be unanimous. I appear to have lost him entirely. I don't know if we can be rescued in any shape or form.
I think that's a problem at Councillor Proctor's end. He'll rejoin the meeting as soon as his connection comes back on.
I don't know if it's the same thing. I see them both muted and frozen. There's no video either.
No, I think he's lost connection to the meeting. As soon as he does rejoin, his video and audio will come back on.
Okay, well, let's progress. So we've got through the substantive decision items this evening. So let's progress to item 7, land at DODDLESPOOL, BETLEY. You've seen the report. I'll ask our officer if we have anything further to add to it.
No, we had hoped that a site visit could have taken place by this meeting. There's been a lot of activity in the background in terms of ensuring that site visits can take place in a safe manner, which have involved our environmental health colleagues, Mr. Walters, and he's been liaising with the police. Unfortunately, we've not been in a position to get the safe site visit procedures in place to enable the site visit to take place by this meeting tonight, but it's anticipated that prior to the next meeting on the 26th of May, it will have been possible to visit this site and a number of other sites in the area where concerns have been expressed, and there's been reported tipping of waste. So hopefully we'll be able to report more at the next meeting.
Okay, so would members be content that this be brought back to the next meeting? I mean, given the circumstances we're in, obviously we've got to do this in safe and due form, but this has been a site that's caused concern in the past, so I would be reluctant to let it sort of slip through the cracks, so to speak. So shall we have this back as an agenda item for our next meeting?
Agreed. Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay, so let's agree on that then and progress to our next item, item 8, the quarterly report on enforcement cases where enforcement has been authorised. And again, I don't know if our officer wishes to comment on this.
No, I've got nothing further to add to what's set out in the report.
Any comments from members?
No, I think we receive it on block.
Okay, so are we well, there are two things, Councillor Race. That'd be the next one, wouldn't it? The report on open enforcement cases, as opposed to this one, which is the report on the stats.
Right.
But are we happy to simply receive item 8?
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's progress to item 9, the report on specific cases. And again, I invite comment from members. The only one that I'm slightly concerned about is this one about the benches in Silverdale, which seems to be bedding down as a recurrent feature here. I just wonder if we could have a little bit more detail on that for our next meeting.
Yes, I have been in contact with the developer, and they had intended to visit the site, and unfortunately that didn't happen prior to the lockdown, and is now proving difficult given the restrictions that are in place. But yeah, I will liaise with the developer and try and get an update. So for the next meeting, did you say?
For the next meeting,
yeah.
please.
Okay.
So it is beginning to hang around quite a lot. Are members happy with that as an idea?
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed.
In that case, are there any further comments on the other cases here? I see no hands raised, so let's progress to our next items. And I'm going to propose that we take items 10 to 13 on block. They're appeals cases. I just ask our officer if she feels that any of these cases bring significant matters of general principle to us rather than being specific things. By and large, we've been successful in these cases.
There's nothing specific that arises from any of those cases that I think we need to explore in more detail. But yeah, they are appeal decisions to be noted. But yeah, shouldn't affect our behaviour in respect to future cases.
Thank you. Again, I just ask colleagues, has anybody got any comments to make on any of these particular items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Williams.
Number 12, agenda item number 12. It was allowed, the application was allowed, but refused on costs. And the officer worked really hard on this particular application. And I agree with everything that the officer said. But again, the inspector had gone on site and he really had a detail of the area. And there's still some issues that I'm sure will come up in enforcement in the future. So again, a good work by the officers, but it was allowed, and at least we didn't get any costs against us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure our officers will be heartened to hear your comments.
Yes.
Any further comment from members on items 10 to 13? Are we content to receive those reports?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
That brings us to our final item, which as ever is urgent business as defined by the relevant section of the relevant Act. I look to our officers. I know of none. I hope they know of none either.
None.
We know of none, which means that we can bring this meeting to a close. A little bit longer than the last one, but again, I think thanks to our IT people, to Mr. Elkington for making this really a rather smooth meeting, I thought. Apart from the disappearance of Councillor Proctor, all has gone well. Again, I can't wish you a safe journey home because you are at home, but have a safe time until we meet again.